Hello.
When your mind is
Good evening, Graham. Good
Yes.
evening, Anthony. And
Hello.
surviving a tedious driving back from Scarborough with some blue lights indicating some kind of problem on the road, but better late than never. So, good evening. So,
Hi,
Graham, you and
Charles.
I bumped into each other at the place to be in Harrogate on Thursday night. So, Graham, where were we on Thursday?
We were at RedHouse Originals Gallery on Cheltenham Out in Harrogate, which is
Mm,
a very small but cool gallery run by Richard McTague, which previously has had Peter Blake and Gareth Mankiewicz through its doors, amongst others.
yeah,
And also, it's hosted a gig by the Coral as well.
yeah.
That's how good it is. And Jim Moir was there, aka Vic Reeves, in his previous long incarnation as a very popular surreal comedian. And he was there for his new exhibition called Birdland, which, as you discovered and I discovered, does exactly what it says in the tin. It's
It
just
does.
lots and lots of paintings, lots of them of birds.
The birds. And some of which were more um, beautiful, pretty direct interpretations of birds. Others more manic in the eyes, which of course birds' eyes can be rather disturbing. So
Mm.
some imagery was more zany, if you like. I liked both elements. I liked the more experimental versions, maybe the more characterful versions, but I also like the works where the birds are in flight, and I thought he captured the birds in flight beautifully.
Well, the interesting about Jim Moir, well, one of many interesting things about Jim Moir, to be honest, is that as his exhibition at the same gallery Red House showed last year, and he obviously
Mhm.
loves Harrogate because he's been back twice in person in the space of 12 months. He's quite versatile. He hasn't got one style. He
That's right.
does
That's right.
several
Mm,
styles with different techniques, all with brushes. It's all
mm,
painting, but very different. So the ground floor at Red House is, as you said, is all these beautiful, direct, literal interpretations of birds close up with no backdrop whatsoever, and they are surprisingly good. I mean,
yeah,
some of them are
mm,
absolutely beautiful. Then the top floor
mm.
gets a bit wilder, and there's
Exactly.
backdrops and
Mm.
there's zany ideas
As should
and a
happen
little
at the
bit of minor
party, of
surrealism.
course. Mm.
What's that?
That's what
What's
should
that?
happen at the party. It gets wilder
Well,
upstairs.
well, exactly, yeah, and it does. But the great thing about Jim Moore is that he's not one of those celebrities or famous people who pretend to be an artist
No.
who, in their day job, is so much better than the painting. And I can think of like Bob Dylan, Ron
Mm,
Wood, Billy
mm,
Connolly as
mm,
examples of people whose day job, i.e., music and comedy, is much more suited to them and being an artist.
mm.
Although they're not terrible, they're just not great artists in
All of
general.
which get high
Whereas,
profile galleries
yeah,
across the country. There's a chain of galleries that all three artists that you've named are
mm,
promoted by, and you're right actually to make that contrast with this. It's fair to say that Jim Wire is a properly serious artist.
well,
If that's by which I mean I don't
he's
mean
more,
the works
yeah.
don't make, but he's a seriously talented artist.
Well, yeah, and also the end result of his talent are paintings which stand up with other very good artists,
Mm,
not very good celebrity artists, but just very good artists, full stop. And he talks and acts like a real artist. He's phenomenally prolific and paints almost every day and bashes things out quite quickly in a spontaneous fashion, but
yeah.
with skill. He's not a dilettante just dabbling
No.
in the arts. He seems to be a real artist, which is because that's how he started off. He went to art college as a young man, and
Yeah.
he sort of fell into comedy. And when I was chatting to him at the beginning of the exhibition, he did say that he'd returned back home to his real love, and that
Mm,
he'd never actually thought of himself as a comedian. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I started off by doing performance art before I even became a comedian, and I
mm,
looked on being doing comedy as just doing performance art. I never thought I was a comedian, which for a man who for more than 30 years had one hit TV show after another,
After
as
another.
well as doing
Yeah.
live tours, is quite a
Yeah.
strong statement.
Yeah.
And on top of that, he said that he claimed to me, and I couldn't, wasn't sure I even believed this, but I had no reason to doubt him. He
Mm.
claimed he'd never actually seen a stand-up comedian live in person in his whole life because he wasn't interested. He says he's never been interested in comedy. That is just a gobsmacking statement.
Yeah, that's a real revelation. Real
Mm,
revelation. I mean, his great love of painting started as a child. He started painting as a child. It was that thing of connecting with the outdoors. He went outdoors. He happened to want to paint. He
exactly.
loved birds straight away. He loved birds, loved connecting with nature, and then grew to love painting them. And so that goes way back, and you could make a connection with a figure like Kez, obviously, in as the appreciation of
Ken
birds
Litchfield.
and what yeah
Yeah.
and what birds represent. Um,
Mm,
but that would perhaps to narrow it down in a way that I think would be misleading. But
yeah.
nevertheless, there is that joy in the countryside. There is that joy, which is captured as a film that's worth sitting in the gallery on the top floor in the back room. There is a film with Jim being interviewed, and also just in the joy of painting. And
Mm,
you watch how he paints, utter confidence of brushstroke, very very telling. Working with watercolor, which is the spontaneity that you picked up on is exactly in watching his technique. There is
mm,
absolute spontaneity, and yet the
mm.
detail that goes with that confident brushstroke, that confident technique, is perhaps what celebrates the amateur from the skill the level
Well, yeah.
that Jim has.
Well, on top of that, if you look at, Ron Wood's paintings or Bob Dylan's, which aren't terrible, they all looked worked on. This is a work. It's not just a work of art. It's a work of work.
Yeah.
Whereas there's a great painting in the second floor of RedHouse
Mm.
by Jim Moir, which is a proper thick oil painting called
Yeah.
Osprey, and it's
Yes.
full of color, full of dynamism, full of character and life. And you can tell that the brushstrokes aren't worked on. It's
No.
almost like he dashed it out, and the
Yeah.
whole thing's perfect. Not a single part of the frame is wrong. There isn't a single aspect of that painting it doesn't work, and it's clearly been done very quickly. And you
Mm.
have to be good to pull that off.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I said to him afterwards, I said, like, I suppose I shouldn't be flabbergasted. I said, but some of the exhibition made me flabbergasted. So he's probably been told he's great by 1,000 people, so that probably meant nothing
Which
to
is
him
always
whatsoever.
must be a nice feeling. It's interesting because when he did when York used to run Illuminating York, it was the first of the cities to do the light festivals. Subsequently, both Durham and Leeds have made a big fuss of it, and York's original Illuminating York event was. Well, interestingly, the first time that Jim did it was the first time you actually had to pay and go and see artworks or light works, more to the point, in artworks
Mm,
lit up and illuminated, or how you interpreted light and how you interpreted art against buildings. And Jim's was the very first one that you actually had to pay for. Now, I think I'm not saying that's because that happened. Illuminating York then lost some of its momentum because as soon as you had to start paying, then there was it's
mm,
fair to say maybe a drop off in attendance, and also actually people became more critical of the works that they had to pay to see them. But nevertheless, that was interesting. Is the scale of that was obviously very contrasting to these very precise, small scale works that we saw. You mentioned Osprey, which was a bigger scale work, and then on the landing there was a much larger work with a lot more color bursting through it, and the birds. Such a contrast to where the birds, as you said, simply a white background for a lot of them. Here, there was every color under the sun as a background, and the birds were flying through it. So, you're right.
mm.
The diversity of techniques, and also actually the diversity of ways that he was representing birds. And I mean, it's a highly recognized art form, painting birds.
Yeah.
I don't want to come across as a complete bird obsessive, but I do collect
Oh,
bird books, and invariably every year I have calendars by artists that specialize in depictions of birds, which some people might think is some people find bird images weird. They don't like the thought that you capture a bird in paint rather than the freedom of going and seeing it in the countryside, which is Uh,
I
I don't go along with the idea that somehow you're trapping a bird by painting it. I don't go
I
along with
don't
it.
I don't mind birds, Charles. I mean, I even went to Benborough to see
Mm.
the puffins on the cliffs overlooking
Yes.
the North
Yeah.
Sea.
Yeah.
Not that far from Bridlington.
Yeah.
But I'm not a huge bird fan, and I quite like the music of Messiaen, the late modern composer,
Yeah.
and one of his big, big albums or compositions is like a series of very short pieces about individual birds. And it's like a three CD collection of different birds. And I have to tell you, I've only played it once. So I'm not a natural bird fan, but what's great about
Are you more in the Hitchcock way of feeling about birds?
no, I just I like birds. I just don't get much feeling out of them really. But the great thing about Jim Moir's interpretation of birds is
Mm.
that not all the paintings are equally good, but every single one, whether it's really good or quite good or okay,
Mm.
is full of life. It's
Mm.
full of personality.
Mm.
Some people can do birds technically strongly,
Yeah.
but they're lifeless. They're flat on the canvas. They're just dead on the canvas. Every single piece of work on birds by Jim Moir that you and me
Mm.
saw
Mm.
at RedHouse and Harrogate had life in it, and that comes from him. You can't fake that.
But
You
that's an
can't
interesting
learn
thing,
that.
isn't it? Because
You've got it.
I
You've either
think
got it, you haven't.
interestingly, you capture the character of the bird in that, but there's an element of Jim coming through in the work. And the
Exactly.
work of Robert Fuller, well-known wildlife artist, is meticulous in its detail. And Robert himself is a very precise person, and his
Mm,
artwork is very, very precise,
mm,
almost photographic. It's not. It's painted, but it's almost the first time you see a work by Robert, you think, oh, that might be a photograph. And there are those who are very much drawn to that meticulous
mm.
detail and the accuracy. But you use that interesting word there, life, that's brought into Jim's work. And as I say, there are those who love Robert's work, Robert Fuller's work, one of the best known of the wildlife artists across Yorkshire, but a very different way of representing. And there is that sense of actually a stillness in, whereas I like to look for movement in the,
Mm.
and to me the movement is the key to it. And so
Yeah,
a barn owl, I think it's when you see a barn owl in flight that's being depicted, there is more to it in that. So
yeah.
that's that was notable in Jim's work, the sense of,
Well,
because
the
it's so
yeah.
spontaneous, the birds had that life to them.
Well, the interesting about his work is that the bird is not in flight in most of the paintings. It is
No.
in some of them, but
Mm.
they're mostly not in flight.
Yeah.
But they all look like they could fly.
Yes. Could be about to fly. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the
And
large
that's the
piece that I
difference.
mentioned, the large piece that I mentioned, the birds, that was one of the ones where they were in flight, and that was, you're right. Most of them are, that they to some extent you would call them a bird portrait, but that
Mm,
I think is to limit them to some extent. I think there's more life to them than a still life portrait.
yeah. But there's a few other interesting things about Jim's visit to Red
Yeah,
House. First of all, it was mobbed again. It's
it,
like Jim Moore
you couldn't get in
anytime
at
he
first.
turns
There were
up.
so many
Yeah,
people there.
yeah, yeah. There's
It had
almost more people
spilled out
outside than
onto the
inside.
street.
Exactly. The other thing was that again he was very, very nice. He made an opening speech in
Yeah,
which he praised the gallery and said how much he liked Harrogate. It was a real quite charm offensive. He does seem to be a really likable guy,
yeah.
and that's why I risked a bit of a risky strategy when I walked up to him at the beginning of the
Mm,
whole event by
mm.
saying to him that did he realise that almost precisely a year ago we had stood in exactly the same spot having a chat.
Yeah.
I said, why don't we have the same chat now as we had last year? And he said, well, how did it go? I said, well, you said this, and then I said that. Then you said this, then I said that. Then you said this, and I said that. He says, that sounds fine.
Yeah. So
So whether he
yeah,
thinks I'm just a complete idiot, I don't know. He probably does.
well, no, I liked your approach. I allowed, well, I decided to keep myself to strictly one question, um, which I just simply asked him, why birds?
Mm. And what did he
And
say?
and then he explained as to what first drew him to birds, his love of nature, and as a young person getting out there wasn't a lot to do, but connecting with nature, it was freely available, and he just felt instinctively connected with it. And I then did ask him the cheesy. I did do a follow-up question, which maybe I shouldn't. I then asked him to name his favorite bird, and what
Oh
I
yeah,
liked, actually, I really liked the answer he gave to that. The next
yeah.
one that he's painting.
That see, he's a clever guy, isn't he? That's a good answer.
I really loved that answer. I
It's a really good
thought.
answer.
So
Yeah, there's
thorough
no flies on
recommendations, Graham.
Jim.
Just remind
Mm.
us how long the exhibition's running, and also just in case anyone isn't aware where to find RedHouse Gallery, just let our
Well,
listeners know where they can do that.
well, RedHouse isn't that far from Harrogate Convention Centre. It's probably a 5 minute walk,
Yeah.
maybe 8 minute walk in the middle of Harrogate, but slightly downhill. But it's only running until I think about September the 29th. So
Yeah, it's a
people better
short
be quick.
exhibition run.
Yeah,
It's a
it's
short
only got,
exhibition run.
I think it's got less than 2 weeks to go.
Yeah.
But it's definitely worth going to see because a lot of the paintings are superb. And obviously, RedHouse is a great gallery.
And we should also mention actually the part of the reason for the exhibition is Jim's already done one book simply called Birds, and the
Mm.
new one is coming out, I think, October, but I'm not sure
Ah,
quite what. And it's a very simple title: More Birds.
that's a lot of imagination there, isn't it?
And I'm trying to remember what the name of the publishers were. An unusual name. Did you spot the name of the publishers?
No, is it Too Wit to Woo?
It was Too Wit to Woo. I think it's really good, Graham, but technically not true. Right, I'm doing one of my frantic.
Okay,
Let's see
what
if we
was
can
it?
find this. While we're thinking aloud,
This is what a podcast's about.
do we get an answer? It's called More Birds. Are we going to get Unbound? Unbound
Unbound.
is the name of the
Okay,
label. The good
all
news
right.
is it's not unbound. The book won't fall to pieces.
Well, also, if Vic Reeves ever toured again as a comedian, although he's not a comedian, it could be Vic Reeves Unbound. That sounds like a comedy tour name.
Victory Unbound. Yeah,
Mm,
absolutely.
mm.
So, Graham, I think it's time for an interruption. It's a
Well,
slightly briefer
yeah,
recording tonight, but let's have an
I've got.
interruption while we can.
Here we go for a quick little rant about modern music. So
Go for it.
There's an Irish band called Sprints, sort of punky, post-punky
Yeah.
in the modern style of various other bands like English Teacher and
Mm.
and they've got an album called Letter to Self, which came out this year. And I like a lot of the tracks, tracks like Literary Mind and Up and Comer and Shadow of a Doubt. Really good tracks. Don't like
Yeah.
it all, but those are great tracks. But the middle of the album sleeve has a couple of phrases as the main part of the sleeve. And the first phrase is, any habit can be broken. And the second phrase is, any night can become day. And I'm thinking, like, good grief, is this what rock and roll's been reduced to? When you think back to like U2, who are not the world's coolest band, they were
No.
trying to like get Nelson Mandela freed from a South African jail. They
Mm.
were fighting for world peace. They were against nuclear power. And that's U2, who weren't cool. But now bands are reduced to like having sort of like self-help phrases. They might as well be, writing a book about how to look after yourself. Is that what
Exactly.
rock and roll is? Is that what rock and roll is now? Apparently
No,
so.
it shouldn't. And no, I never thought of it as being some form of self-medication. No.
Mm. I think it's sort of turned into that. It reminds me of the me generation, the 1970s, except
Mm.
that wasn't rock and roll bands. That was singer-songwriters like James Taylor and Joni Mitchell. They had a slightly similar feel to them, but only slightly.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's my little old man's rant.
That's fair enough, Graham. Now,
Mm.
I went to a world premiere in Scarborough, and you can probably guess, Graham.
I know exactly who it is. Acheborn.
So this is Sir Alan's latest, and this is I mean it's something remarkable. 90 plays. The 91st play is already written, and he's partway through writing the 92nd. So, and today actually I went to an additional event, which was fundraising for the Stephen Joseph Theatre,
Oh yeah. Yep.
and it was a rehearsed reading of one of the plays that Alan wrote in lockdown called Father of Invention. And it was one of his plays that's addressing artificial intelligence and robots and where are we going in this world. But the show and tell piece was traveling in the opposite direction, rooted in Alan's own beginnings in theatre. Of course, he started as an actor and directed his first play in 1961, which was a French farce. Now, the reason I mention that is that part of what happens in show and tell is a French farce is performed towards the end of the play, in the style of the play that Alan put on and directed in 1961, when Stephen Joseph himself was in charge of the Stephen Joseph Theatre, and Alan was given the budget of nothing, and if you push me, £5.
Generous.
So it's partly, well, it is entirely a hymn of love, a letter of love, a love letter to theatre, which, as Alan says in his notes, this has run for more than 60 years, this love of theatre. And it does come across most strongly as that. It's a piece that celebrates theatre, the power of theatre, the possibilities of theatre. And to do so, it is set in modern times, post-COVID, with a struggling company that is facing the possibility of closing down, a company with a long history. Rooted as being the equivalent of, do you remember the Centre 42 movement, Graham? Does that movement mean anything to you?
I do not know.
So that was Arnold Wesker's movement. And indeed, this is part of what's lovely within Alan's play, is that he reflects on the impact of Centre 42. He reflects on Arnold Wesker, but he has a great line of driving most people away from theatre since Cromwell. But of course, he banned theatre, which was a lovely line, and that's very typical of the humour that plays out. So you've got, at the same time, you have an old man who ran not a theatre company, but ran a big, powerful business, and to the extent he was living in this wonderful manor house. But he is now in the incipient stages of dementia, but he's booked this play to be put on for his wife's birthday. But he's forgetful, partly because it's in the incipient stages of dementia. So you have modern elements within it, the passing of time within it, the passing of time within theatre within it, a love of theatre that for Alan has never dimmed, never died, and won't ever die. And then also, because it's so playful as a piece, you have this, as I say, because they start rehearsing this farce, they end up performing it in costume. So it's myriad things going on within one play.
Yeah. Is it good?
It's hugely enjoyable, absolutely. And I think, if you like, one could say, I don't want to use the word that it's indulgent, because I think it's better than just thinking that it's indulgent, but it is backward looking. It is an appreciation of theatre through the years. And so
is it very relaxed and unashamed?
Is it one of Alan's pieces that's make go on, Graham, ask that question again.
Is he very comfortable, relaxed and unashamed
it's exactly what that is. This is rather than Alan making huge points, I think, beyond the point about, it's important that theatre companies are able to keep going. It's an appreciation of what theatre has meant to him, what it's brought to him, what he thinks theatre brings to people. So in that, I don't want to use that word indulging, because I don't think it is, but I think it's simply, it's just reveling in the joy of theatre and the impact of theatre. And I should also say the joy of humour within that.
Yeah.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.